Good evening, class. Right. So, 2-3 points of remembrance before we do this. One is value addition, in the sense I would majorly focus upon what mandatory points to be written for every topic. One. The second thing that I would be focusing upon is value addition that you can remember. Because my major focus is people who are writing mains this year, right? And sometimes it might be such that value addition that you have need not be same as value addition that I am giving you. So ho sakta hai, at this point of time I don't want to bring in some point of confusion, right? So I would only give some mandatory value addition. I would only give some mandatory points to be written, and most of the focus of the session is going to be focusing on structuring your answers, right? So this is what is the major point, and in that particular topic, how can you bring in dynamism, right? So this is my point of focus for today and tomorrow. Today mostly we'll try doing at least 3/4 of paper 1, and tomorrow we would do the rest of paper 2 along with whatever is remaining, right? So now, when you look at these first 3 chapters, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, right? Always remember the specialities of anthropology whenever you are writing these answers from this chapter. Now, when I say specialities of anthropology, always remember, anthropology is special for its holism. Anthropology is special for its positivist as well as non-positivist approach. Anthropology is special for its scientific method. Anthropology is special for its emic and ethic approach, right? And anthropology is also special for its inductive and deductive methods. And anthropology is also special for its diachronic and synchronic approach. Now, just a quick one-liners on each of this. When I say holistic understanding of anthropology, it's simple. That you will have to talk about the social, biological and cultural, one. You will have to talk about the past, the present and the future, second. The third aspect is you will have to talk about something which is static, something which is changing. I always call that as what? Flux in the concept. We have things changing. And the third dimension that you will have to talk about is diversity of that particular concept. Because we see this particular question was asked 4 times in last 11 years. Holistic understanding of anthropology, right? So it fundamentally means for this aspects, anthropology is holistic. If you want to follow, you can also follow the structure directly from 1.3. Right? Whenever they are asking about relevance of anthropology in today's world, dynamics or anthropology is expanding in its knowledge base, or anthropology is changing, or anthropology is holistic, you can simply use that how is socio-cultural holistic, how is biological holistic, how is archaeological holistic, and how is linguistic holistic. So use 1.3 as your base structure for questions which are broad. Questions which are broad, use that as the structure. Use these points to write your 1.2. Because sociology versus anthropology, any other subject will not have these dimensions except anthropology. Very simple. And anthropology will have what? SBC, social, biological and cultural. Simple understanding. When we look at positivism versus non-positivism, the simple understanding of positivism versus non-positivism is, you see, that this is mostly a macro approach. This is mostly a micro approach. Here we see the society is valued more than individual experiences. But whereas here, you see the individual experiences are valued more than society. And apart from that, you also have to understand this positivistic approach is more objective in nature, whereas this is more subjective in nature. And you have to understand this is more of societal perception, but whereas this is more of individual's perception. And based on this individual perception and based on individual experience, this is what is turning out to be a phenomenology. Right? 2019 PYQ, phenomenological understanding. Phenomenological understanding is nothing but non-positivist understanding, individual's understanding, micro understanding, subjective understanding. And you see, there are no universal laws, there are no universal rules. It keeps changing. One simple understanding is phenomenological understanding of caste. When you see phenomenological understanding of caste once upon a time was having book view. When you talk about book view, it was G.S. Gure's understanding of caste, those 6 different characteristic features of caste, or Louis Dumont's understanding of caste in Homo hierarchicus based on purity and pollution, because he was a structuralist. But when you look at the later on understanding of caste became field view. When you look at the field view of caste, it is more of M.N. Srinivasa's understanding of caste. And what was seen in the context of M.N. Srinivas categorically said it is not rigid. You have social mobility. And it said that the ritual purity was not determining the societal position. That is where you see the emergence of Sanskritization. That is where you see the concept of westernization coming into the picture, impacting your socio-cultural change of India in the context of caste system. Today, what do we see? Today, we see the contemporary view of caste. When you look at the contemporary view of caste, that is more of phenomenological understanding of caste. For example, some perceive caste is a discrete identity. Some perceive caste is a discrete identity. And caste is a discrete identity spoken by whom? Surendra Jyotka. Right? It is spoken by Surendra Jyotka. That means what? There is one line which is given by Surendra Jyotka who says that the lower caste perceive that there is even a lower caste existing to them. That means it is simply meaning that there is a marginal section existing within the marginal section. There is a marginal section existing within the marginal section, and that is where we see the concept of Bangization. You would have heard about the conflict of Bangis, right? You would see that movie Article 15. In that, the concept of Bangis, and there the perception is what? Marginals among marginals. Untouchables among untouchables, lower caste within the lower caste. And that is why we are saying that caste no more is a societal perspective. Caste today is what? Individual's perspective, where everybody perceives their own identity. And that is what is seen with respect to the phenomenological understanding of caste and positivism and non-positivism. Then apart from that, you also see emic and etic perspective. When you talk about emic and etic perspective, very simple. Emic is insider's perspective, whereas etic is outsider's perspective. Emic is insider perspective and etic is outsider perspective. When you look at inductive and deductive, again, simple understanding. When you talk about inductive methodology that is used in the context of anthropology, you see that there is already some data which is available. On this basis, we create a particular theory or hypothesis. Now, who propounded this particular dimension, my dear? Majorly in the context of historical particularism by whom? Franz Boas. Historical particularism by Franz Boas. Franz Boas believed in collection of data. One. Then apart from that, when you talk about the deductive methodology, you see that first there is an hypothesis. On this particular basis of hypothesis, you see that data is collected. And this data that is collected is analyzed. And then we see the validation of the hypothesis. The validation of the hypothesis, that means they had an assumption initially, and based on the assumption, what fundamentally happens is you see that they were validating the assumption is right or wrong. So that is what is inductive and deductive. Now, also remember, these words get handy when you don't know what to write in an answer. Because anthropology will have all of these specialities, and from 1.1 to 1.3 you can simply use this structure. Then apart from that, when you look at some question from 1.3, right, when you look at some question from 1.3, always remember that the point of reference has to be syllabus. The point of reference has to be syllabus. Whenever you are talking about socio-cultural, you start with 2.1 to 2.5, 3 to 5 and 7 chapter. What is 2.1? Culture. 2.2 society. 2.3 marriage. 2.4 family. 2.5 kinship. Third chapter is economic. Fourth chapter is political. Fifth is religion. And then directly go to 7th chapter, which is language. Right? So socio-cultural dimension, whatever is the dimensions here. Now that means what? You see there is a concept, and to this concept there is a change which is existing, and this is what is talking about. Most of you use this word, no, contemporary relevance, which is bogus in anthropology. Please remember, right? I don't know, always use anthropological extensions or anthropological relevance or fieldwork observations, something like that. Right? Something of that particular choice. Don't use this contemporary relevance like general studies. That's nonsense. Right? Utter nonsense that is, I'm telling you. Okay. Then, in biological, straight away go from 1.4. Then, you have 1.5, 1.6. Then, along with this, straight away go from 9.1 to 9.8. What is 1.4? Theories. In that, synthetic theory, Darwinism, Lamarckism. 1.5, 1.6, your primates and fossils. Then 9.1 to 9.3 is what? Basic genetics. 9.1 is man family studies, 9.2 is Mendelian genetics, and 9.3 is forces of evolution. Right? Then 9.4 is chromosomal abnormalities. 9.5, race and racism. 9.6, genetic markers. 9.7, ecological. 9.8, epidemiological. Why am I telling you all of this is, please understand the structure in your answer should always flow from the syllabus. Do not deviate from the syllabus with respect to the structures in anthropology. So, that is with respect to that. Archaeological, very simple again. Go to 1.8. In 1.8, what is there? Dating methods. Then we have different time periods in the geological time scale. Then go to 1.1 to 1.3 of paper 2. Paper 2 mein kya hai? 1.1 again, lithic cultures in the context of India. Then 1.2 with respect to the fossils in Shivalik Hills and Narmada Basin. And 1.3 is ethnoarchaeology. Most of us fail to recognize ethnoarchaeology as part of archaeology. Don't do that. Right? So that is another understanding. In linguistics, straight away bring in from the chapter 7. Remember this. Now once you do this, then let's get into 1.4. Now when you look at 1.4, mostly it is what? One side it is Darwinism. One side it is Mendel, and these categorically converging into what? These categorically converging into understanding the aspects of evolution. Understanding the aspects of evolution. And whenever we are trying to understand the origin, the spread and variation of what? The origin, spread and fixation of what? Of the variation. And this is what is being called as a synthetic theory of evolution. Synthetic theory of evolution. Right? Synthetic theory talks about what? Origin of variation, spread of variation, fixation of variation. That is synthetic theory. And synthetic theory talks about what? Some aspects of Mendel, some aspects of Darwin. And there you also see some aspects like collective genetics being spoken. Right? Some aspects of collective genetics being spoken. Then you also have some theory of gene being spoken. Apart from this, you also have to understand that this synthetic theory of evolution that is existing, it has resulted in something called as the Falconer's forces of evolution. Right? Falconer writes a book called Quantitative Genetics. The theory of quantitative genetics. Now when Faulkner is talking about this theory of quantitative genetics, you see that Faulkner talks about forces of evolution. And when you look at these forces of evolution, you see that the forces of evolution are divided into two. One is the systemic forces and the other one is the dispersive forces. One is the systemic forces and the other one is the dispersive forces, where you see the Faulkner's forces of evolution are existing. And when you look at the systemic forces, it is what? MMS. What is that? Mutation, migration and selection. And this is what dispersive forces are. IG. One is inbreeding. The other one is the genetic drift. Inbreeding, the other one is genetic drift. So you see, when you talk about these forces of evolution, one is the systemic forces, the other one is dispersive forces. Something is fixing the variation, something is spreading the variation, and something is originating the variation. All of this is nothing but synthetic theorem. This is forces of evolution. This is nothing but what? This is nothing but your 9.3. And what is our understanding? That when we see this MMS IG is all constant, that becomes Hardy-Weinberg law. Yes or no? That becomes Hardy-Weinberg law. When we talk about Hardy-Weinberg law, all of these forces are not operating. And when all of these forces are not operating, that is where I see the emergence of Hardy-Weinberg law coming into the picture. Simple. That P plus Q is equals to 1. P square plus 2PQ plus Q square is equals to 1. Simple understanding. Okay. Then, apart from this, there is another important dimension here with respect to biocultural factors. Now please remember, this is one area which is again every alternate year we have a question. Now whenever they are talking about biocultural aspects, now be very clear with your structure in this with respect to biocultural. Whom all to use? Definitely you will have to use Scholens and Service. Because Scholens and Service talks about what? Specific and general evolution, and all of their basis is what? Biology influencing culture and culture influencing biology. Simple. And apart from that, whenever we are talking about biology influencing culture, simple examples is what? The cognitive capacity influencing tools, the cognitive capacity influencing language, cognitive capacity influencing tools, cognitive capacity influencing language to a larger extent. And you see, there is another gene called as FOXP2 gene, right? FOXP2 gene, which is responsible for language. And apart from that, you have certain areas like a Broca's area and Wernicke's area, right? Broca's area and Wernicke's area, that is also responsible for language. Right, so that means change in biology resulting in emergence of culture. Change in biology resulting in emergence of culture. One. Then we also see culture influencing biology. When you look at this culture influencing biology, one simple aspect that you see here is with respect to emergence of fire. And with the emergence of fire, what is seen to be happening with the emergence of fire? We see there is change in dentition. With the emergence of fire, there is change in dentition. When we talk about changing in dentition, what is seen to be happening with respect to dentition? We see from prognathic, there is a transition to orthognathic with respect to dentition. Right? And prognathic to orthognathic. And apart from this, what else you have? You have the incisors and the molars and the canines being restructured. And you also see that with the emergence of fire, we see cooked food, the absence of diastema comes into the picture. What is diastema? The gaps between the teeth that is existing, and you see the absence of diastema because of changing dentition. Why is this dentition changing? Because changing nature of the food, because of the emergence of the fire. Right? So remember these examples. And in this particular chapter, you should, or in this particular question, you should definitely talk about 9.7, 9.8 and 10th chapter. you should definitely bring in this context. These are general examples, but what am I going to draw from my syllabus is when you look at 9.7, what is happening in 9.7? In 9.7, we see change in environment is resulting in what? Change in biology. It is also resulting in change in culture. Now, there you talk about an example of what? Most of the times, the easier example is with respect to high altitude. Most of the time, the easier example is what? Higher altitude. Because you have to understand environment is part of culture. And whenever they are talking about biocultural approach, do not miss these dimensions of 9.7, which is ecological determinism. And who is talking about this ecological determinism? You see, one is the Julian H. Stewart. Then apart from that, you see Roy Rappaport. You see Roy Rappaport also talking about this ecological determinism. Because you see this Julian H. Stewart talks about what? Culture ecology approach. Julian H. Stewart talks about culture ecology approach. Right? So that is one more important dimension. And what dimension of 9.8 has to be brought in? When you look at 9.8, we see Umran talking about something called as epidemiological transition. Umran talking about something called as epidemiological transition. And when you talk about this epidemiological transition, it is very simple. It says that any disease and any society has undergone changes, and it has undergone changes in 3 different phases. One is what is called as the age of pestilence. One is what is called as age of pestilence. Then here you see age of sedentarism, and this is what is called as the age of pandemics. Age of pandemics. And when you talk about this age of pestilence, what is happening with respect to age of pestilence? You see, in Neolithic culture, what happened? Agriculture increased, and because of which what happens? We see instances of stagnancy of water. And what happened because of this? Because of this, you find the parasitic population increasing. And this parasitic population increasing resulted in what? Resulted in a case of infectious diseases. Resulted in a case of infectious diseases. And that is what is seen in the first phase. And when you look at the second phase, slowly what happened? You see that with the sedentary lifestyle, what do we observe? We observe there is an increase of lifestyle diseases. There's an increase of lifestyle diseases. Why did we get over infectious diseases? Because one factor that is resulting in age of sedentarism is majorly because of increase in medical technology. Increase in medical technology that has resulted in battling the infectious diseases. But apart from that, we also see the sedentary lifestyle has been resulting in lifestyle diseases. And slowly after that, what happens? We have the age of epidemics and pandemics. When you look at the age of epidemics and pandemics, a classic example is what? COVID-19. Right? A classic example is COVID-19. And what is happening here? In the third phase, the interaction between environment and human is seen to be changing. The interaction between environment and human is seen to be changing. And because of this change in the interaction of environment and human, automatically what does it result in? It results in emergence of pandemics. It results in emergence of pandemics. They say no, as human beings adapt to the microorganisms adapt to the human beings also. Right? In that book, The Sapiens, right? Harari, he talks about this particular line, saying that just like human beings adapting to microorganisms, even microorganisms adapt. In our science and technology, we talk about AMR, antimicrobial resistance. Wahi to hai wo. Right? So that is one simple understanding, and definitely bring in these aspects. Wherever you see a question on biocultural, wherever you see a question on biocultural, biology influencing culture, culture influencing biology, and definitely what? These dimensions. And if you still wish to get something, you can get 10th chapter. What's happening to 10th chapter? When you look at 10th chapter in combination with 11th chapter, what do you observe? You see one specific concept called as the concept of secular trends. Now, why is the secular trend? You know, in secular trends, what is the secular trend? Secular trend is nothing but the pattern of growth. Secular trend is nothing but the pattern of growth, or whenever I talk about this pattern of growth, this is nothing but the average growth. And you see that there are three probabilities of this secular trend which is existing. One is a positive secular trend, the other one is a neutral secular trend, the other one is a negative secular trend. When this is above average growth, I call that as positive. When I say it is equal to average, I call that as neutral. When I say it is less than the average, it is negative secular trend. And one simple case that you will have to see here is with respect to the changing average height among Indians. When you look at the changing average height among the Indians, what has been happening? The average height among the Indians has been increasing. One. You should also see the age of menarche among the Indian girls. When you look at the age of the menarche among Indian girls, it has been decreasing. Who? You see, the R.C.Reddy et al. R.C.Reddy et al. Had studied this particular trend of declining age of menarche among Indian girls. Now, when you look at why is this happening, this is a biological phenomena. But what is the fundamental change is the change in nutrition has resulted in change in the age of menarche. And when you look at this change in nutrition, what do you observe with respect to this change in nutrition? More fat composition, more protein composition, and automatically what happens? The age of menarche started decreasing. So that means what? Culture influencing biology. Culture influencing biology. So definitely bring in these aspects. Although it is a question of 1.4, I'll bring in the dimensions of 1.4, I'll bring in the dimensions of 9.7, 9.8, 10th, 11th in combination. Right? So that is another simple takeaway when it comes to 1.4. Then in 1.5, 1.6, right? 1.5 we are talking about primates. Now in this particular primate, we see one very important dimension is comparative anatomy and the other one is skeletal changes. More or less it is the same question. More or less it is the same question. The easiest part in this is what? Now when you look at those, I'll give you one simple table. Yes. Yes. Now one simple table is what? Skull, face and dentition. Now with respect to skull, what is changing? Frontal lobe, temporal, occipital, then sagittal crust, and nuchal crust, then forehead. You see foramen magnum, then supraorbital ridges, infraorbital ridges, right? That is the aspects with respect to skull. Then when you look at face and dentition, we see a zygomatic process, the aspects of diastema, the aspects of masectory muscles, then the dental arches, then mandible, then orthognathic and prognathic, orthognathic and prognathic, and simple, the nasal bridge, right? Changes will happen with respect to face and dentition. Then apart from that, when you look at the other area, what is changing is the vertebral column. The other area that is changing is what? The vertebral column. Now when you talk about this vertebral column, what happens? 4 curves, then barrel shaped thorax, then lumbo-sacral region, barrel shaped thorax and lumbo-sacral region. This is with respect to the vertebral column. Then when we look at the pelvic region, you see ilium, ischium, acetabulum, a gluteus maximus, gluteus medius and gluteus minimus, gluteus maximus, gluteus medius, gluteus minimus. Extremely important is linea aspera, because linea aspera is an evidence of bipedalism. Linea aspera is an evidence of erect posture. Now I'll tell you, in this particular list you have to definitely write lumbosacral region, you will definitely have to write diastema, you will definitely have to write orthognathic and prognathic. Previously when I was talking about skull, you will definitely have to write the foramen magnum, you will definitely have to write supraorbital ridges. You can miss any others, because in the flow what happens is generally this is a 20 marker. Question number 2A is generally from this section. Either it is 1.5, 1.6, question number 2A of paper 1 is from this section. So you see that these are some of the very important dimensions. Then you also have limbs. Now in the context of limbs, you see the radius and ulna, then a carpals and metacarpals, carpals and metacarpals. Then you have femur, tibia, fibula, then medial arches, and a calcaneum bone. Medial arches and calcaneum bone compulsory to be written when you are writing limbs. Medial arches and calcaneum bone compulsory to be written when you are writing arches, right? Now also remember, whenever you are writing these two questions, there are some words which are to be definitely used. One is the process of hominization. One. Apart from that, you should also use a process of organic evolution, a process of mosaic evolution, a process of organic evolution, a process of mosaic evolution. It's a process of biocultural adaptation. It's a process of biocultural adaptation. Then you also see that there are episodes of gradualism and punctuated equilibrium. There are episodes of gradualism and punctuated equilibrium. These words, throw it in your answer wherever you feel like. You start your intro with talking about, suppose if they are asking you about Homo erectus, this year it is highly probable. My anticipation is Homo erectus in 2A this year. So don't worry, I'll give that list, right? That list will be published in my Telegram channel. I'll give that list, right? But Whenever if they are asking 2A, for suppose if I am talking about Homo erectus, what happens? What is the structure for that? The simple structure for that is first, you give your basic introduction with organic evolution or mosaic evolution. One. Then straight away talk about what? Geographical distribution. Then talk about what? Characteristic features. Characteristic features majorly what? The physiological characteristic features. Right? And then you can talk about what? The cultural characteristic features. And always remember, whenever we are writing Homo erectus or whenever we are writing changes due to erect posture, talk about the theories of bipedalism. Talk about the theories of bipedalism. Now when you look at the theories of bipedalism, largely you see one is the carrying model. One is the carrying model. What is this carrying model? You see that individual became bipedal to carry. To carry what? To carry food, to carry offspring, to carry weapons, to carry tools. So that is why we see emergence of bipedalism. The second is the vigilance model. The second is the vigilance model. Now when you look at vigilance model, it is fundamentally what? Bipedal, to look around, and that is a point of safety and security. Then apart from that, you also see the third model is bipedalism is for heat dissipation. To dissipate the heat, because you increase the surface area by being bipedal rather than quadrupedal, so automatically what happens? Dissipating the heat. Then when you see the energy efficiency model. Energy efficiency model, because you have to understand, if you have to move for long distances any given day, bipedalism is a convenient posture. Bipedalism is a convenient posture any given day with respect to this. Then, and the last theory that talks about bipedalism is what? Display model. And when we talk about this display model, this is majorly with an ambition of attracting the opposite sex. For what? For what process? Mating process. So whenever you are writing 1.5, that is especially whenever you are writing on erect posture, whenever you are writing on bipedalism, whenever you are writing Homo erectus, any of these skeletal changes, please ensure this. Now if you can't write it like this, you can simply say theories of bipedalism 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just one flow chart. And write the theory, write one word under that. Write the theory and write one word under that. Keep that mandatorily. And as I told you, use these words mandatorily in that particular section. Now one more thing that you have to understand is if at all there is question with respect to the primates, right? Now we don't see any big question coming from primates. In case if it is there also, you can simply remember one person to be stated, who? Jane Goodall. That you will definitely have to state this individual. I am not talking about other value additions at all, because I still have 6 more thinkers. But at this juncture, it might appear very difficult for you to digest them. Right? For us, we definitely know Jane Goodall, Gombe National Park, and her work on what? Chimpanzees. Her work on chimpanzees, and majorly for what purpose? Majorly in the context of social behavior. Understanding social behavior of whom? Social behavior of primates. Right? And one small concept I will add here. Whenever you talk about culture and biology, you see that we have a concept called as, you can use this as a beautiful conclusion of 1.5, 1.6. That is what is called as the concept of primate continuum. When you talk about primate continuum, the simple understanding is, whatever biology, whatever culture was existing, it has been started at the stage of primates. And whatever biology, whatever culture is seen to be existing, it is simple, right? It is primitive, it is simple, it is primitive, and it has originated with whom? Primates. And you see that over a period of time, it has sophisticated among whom? The humans. And that is why we say the culture in human being is not unique to human being, but rather it is primate continuum. When we say it is primate continuum, what is happening? The culture is seen to be evolving from whom? The primate section. That is where here, when you look at the human, what happens? It became more sophisticated. Right? It became more complex. And more than anything, what happens, my dear? You see, it got differentiated as it moved towards the human beings. It got differentiated as it moved towards the human being. So when you talk about 1.5, 1.6, you can definitely use this concept of primate continuum. And primate continuum is what? Be it biology, be it culture, everything has originated with primates but continued and evolved at the stage of human beings. Right? So that could be one decent conclusion with respect to 1.5, 1.6. Next. As I already told you, this 1.6 wala structure is what? Organic evolution. Then geographical distribution, characteristics, physiological character, then cultural characters. Now culture will start from whom? Homo habilis. Culture will start from Homo habilis, right? What are the kinds of tool tradition that we see? ODK culture. What is ODK culture? Osteo, Donto, Kerato. Yes. Then from there what happens? From ODK what happens? Evolution of culture. How did the culture evolve? Especially tool technology. We see Acheulean, Abbevillean, Levalloisian. Then after Levalloisian we have this Gravettian, Aurignacian, right? Magdalenian. All these are seen where? In Upper Paleolithic. Then slowly in Mesolithic what happens? The microlithic technology coming into the picture. And moving to the Neolithic, what happens in Neolithic? We see celt technology, polished technology, grounded technology coming into the picture. That is how the technology, that is how the culture has evolved. That is what is one basic understanding. So talk about the cultural characteristic features. And definitely talk about the phylogenetic status. One phylogeny you remember for all. Right? Phylogeny matlab hui 2 branch, 3 branch. You remember any one which has simpler understanding, right? Whichever you feel like, either it is 2 branch or 3 branch, right? Because you see Legras-Clark's phylogenetic status is also fine. Anything is fine. Any one, you would have seen this dabba diagram, my dear, in your basic notes, right? So एक तो remember कर लो और उसके हिसाब से आप लोग लिख लो ना exam पे, ठीक है? Next. 1.7 में कुछ नहीं है. There is nothing in 1.7, right? Dummy chapter, they can remove it. ठीक है? 1.8. One dimension that we see here is with respect to what? Dating. And you see that you please use this word dating is a tool in archaeological anthro. Don't miss using this word. Dating is a tool for what? Positioning a particular entity in geological timescale. Positioning a particular entity in geological timescale. Now here when you look at dating methodologies, you see there is absolute dating and there is relative dating. In the absolute dating, you see that the exact period in the geological timescale is done. But whereas in the context of relative, what is seen to be happening, it is not the exact but relative. That means we use some words like older, younger or newer. And what are we saying? Later the culture, earlier it appears. Yes or no? That means if I talk about one simple technique of stratigraphy, what's happening in stratigraphy? I see the uppermost layer happens to be the youngest culture, and the deepermost or the lowermost happens to be the oldest culture. That is what is meant by relative dating. Now in absolute dating methodologies, what all we have? We have carbon dating. Yes. Then apart from that, we have potassium, we have argon methods that is existing. Then we also have dendrochronology. Dendrochronology is what? Measuring the T-rings. That is one. Apart from that, you also have thermoluminescent method. Thermoluminescent method, 2021 10 marker, right? Then when you look at relative dating methods, we have stratigraphy, we have pollen analysis, stratigraphy, all these are what? Relative dating. What is the advantage of absolute? Exact time period. What is the disadvantage of absolute? Technologically intensive. Yes, costly process. What is relative? Easy, simple, right? But what is the problem with relative? Precision and accuracy is a problem. Precision and accuracy is a problem because the habit of UPSC is it is constantly asking you write the advantages and disadvantages. So when you can't recollect anything, absolute means it is exact, it is precise, technology intensive. Problem here with respect to relative is what? Relative, not precise, simple, cheap, right? You play with these words here and there. Okay. Then when you look at Paleolithic culture, some characteristic features, some important characteristic features, right? Now in Paleo, what happens? You see these are hunter-gatherers mostly, right? These are hunter-gatherers, and what kind of tool technology we have? Simple tools. That could be what? Chopper, chopping, right? That could be hand axes, right? That could be flake tools, that could be blades and burins, that could be blades and burins. And you see this period being divided into three. Yes, lower, middle, upper, right? And lower is what? Early and late. Early and late. Early lower Paleolithic is attributed to whom? It is not with respect to this, it is with respect to Homo habilis. Homo habilis, because Australopithecus is mostly ODK, right? Homo habilis, this is who? Homo erectus. Middle Paleolithic is who? Neanderthal. Upper Paleolithic is who? Modern man. Upper Paleolithic is who? Modern man, right? That is how they trace. Okay. Then when you look at Mesolithic, it is transitionary period. It is interglacial period. And what happens? We see wild crop collection is one characteristic feature. And we see the riverbed habitations to be happening. And not only the riverbed habitations which are seen here in the context of Mesolithic, you also see the kind of tool technology is what? It is microlithic. And you also see it is having what? Handmade pottery. Handmade pottery. Right? So transition period, microlithic. And one more if you want, you can also add, it had composite tools. It had composite tools. Right? Then when you look at the mandatory characteristics of Neolithic, you see that G.V. Child says that this particular period is what? Revolution in his book. What happened in history? He says, Social Evolution is one book. One more book he writes is What Happened in History. In that he talks about this. Okay. Then apart from the G.V. Child revolution, you also have to understand these are mostly settled agriculture. Right? Settled agriculture. And we see wheel-made pottery. Wheel-made pottery is another important characteristic. We see the emergence of trade. We see the emergence of concept of surplus. We see the emergence of trade. We see the emergence of surplus. We see settled agriculture. We see the village system coming into the picture. The village system coming into the picture. So all these are what? All these are some of the mandatory characteristic features of Neolithic revolution or Neolithic periods. Then Chalcolithic is not very much asked, but Chalcolithic, you please remember, Chalcolithic is composite of copper plus the stone. And you also remember mostly in central India and western India. Mostly in central India and western India. And you also see mostly it is what kind of settlements? It is rural settlements. It is rural settlements where you see with respect to Chalcolithic cultures which are seen to be existing. And here you see Iron Age. And what's happening with the emergence of iron? you see, the tools became more strong, because of which clearing of forest, because of which increased agriculture, because of which increased surplus, because of which increased trade and increased economy, because of which increased administration, because of which emergence of political system. Emergence of political system. So that is what is seen with respect to the Iron Age. And sometimes we also see its corollary existing with what? The megalithic period. If you want to refer some megalithics, refer megalithic of South India and refer megalithic of Northeast. Right? And what should be the structure whenever you are writing these lithic cultures? Always remember. First start with the time period. And then talk about the tool technology in specific. Start with time period. Then talk about tool technology with respect to this. Then apart from the tool technology that you're starting with respect to this, you should also talk about the characteristic features. In the characteristic features, talk about the social characteristics, talk about the religious characteristics, talk about the political characteristics, talk about the economic characteristics. Right? Because you see in Paleolithic also we had certain political characteristic features like what? Band societies. In band society, what is the nature of political aspect that is existing? It is situational leadership which is present. So talk about those dimensions, right? So talk about those aspects with respect to characteristic features. And then in paper 1 also, please write the Indian context. Write the Indian context. Keep a separate heading, India. Or Indian Paleolithic, Indian Mesolithic, Indian Chalco, Indian, keep specific heading. Although you might not remember European names, although you might not remember Near East names, although, what is Near East? Middle East. Middle East is Near East, please remember, right? 2021 we had one question. One of my friend interpreted it as Northeast. Near East is not Northeast, East. Manam Assam inka. So you have to understand that Near East here is Middle East, right? The Central Asian, also not Central Asia, the West Asian region, right? So Indian context and conclusion. Now what is the simple conclusion? What is the simple conclusion? This will fill the vacuum or fill the missing link. Any culture will fill the missing link. Missing link in what? In expanding the archaeological knowledge or archaeological anthropology. Don't break your head too much. Because already you have given a lot of information there. Conclusion simply say, it is going to fill the vacuum, it is going to fill the missing link, or it is going to provide the missing link in expanding the understandings of anthropological or archaeological anthropology, something like that. Okay? Now coming to 2.1, that is culture. अब इसमें one very important aspect this year is going to be ethnocentrism and cultural relativism. इस साल पक्का है वो, right? Because gap వచ్చింది. And so automatically it is expected for this year. Now when you look at this 2.1 culture, now most of the times we see this culture questions will be little dynamic, right? I would say culture and society in combination. Now when you look at culture, always remember E.B. Taylor's definition. What is E.B. Taylor? Simply say culture is a complex whole. What is Malinowski saying? Culture is an integrated whole. If you can't remember the whole definition of culture, you can simply remember culture is a complex whole. Culture is an integrated whole in the context of any introduction of culture. Then whenever we are talking about ethnocentrism and cultural relativism, you see that this is originating from W.G. Sumner's concept. W.G. Sumner's concept of in versus out group. That should be your opening line. And there what you see that it is driven by superiority complex. It is driven by superiority complex, right? It is a factor of dominance which is existing. It is a factor of dominance which is seen to be existing in the context of ethnocentrism or ethnocentric understanding. And you see that the ethnocentric understanding has resulted in some aspects of racism, some aspects of communalism, some aspects of regionalism, some aspects of ethnic conflict, some aspects of caste conflicts. So that means whenever you are writing paper 2 on these dimensions, please bring in the aspects of ethnocentric attitudes, right? Because all these are attitudes towards a particular culture, right? And all of those have been manifested in the form of what? Regionalism, communalism, tribal conflict, caste conflict, peasant movements. Wherever I see ethnocentric understanding, I see there is automatically what? There is an unrest which is resulting in a rebellion, which are these conflicts. Then antidote to this is what? Cultural relativism. What is the core concept of cultural relativism? It says two cultures cannot be compared because they have different history and histories can never be compared, right? Two cultures can never be compared because they have a different history of origin. And can you compare the histories of this culture? No. When you cannot compare the histories, you cannot compare culture. When you are not comparing culture, this becomes cultural relativism. When you are not comparing histories, this becomes historical particularism of whom, my dear? Franz Boas. Right? So whenever you are writing this aspect, please ensure you bring in historical particularism vis-a-vis cultural relativism. Don't differentiate. And apart from that, you also see this is driven by a factor of mutual respect. This is driven by a factor of mutual respect. So that is another very important dimension that has to be remembered with respect to this. Apart from mutual respect, you please understand, whenever this debate is going on, it is your imperative to bring in the debate of cultural relativism vis-a-vis human rights. Right? Cultural relativism vis-a-vis human rights. Because if I have to tell you ethnocentrism, antidote is what? Cultural relativism. And cultural relativism, there is what? Human rights. And what is the relation that is seen to be existing? Human rights any given day is greater than cultural rights. Human rights are more prioritized over cultural relativism. And that is where we see Mark Juncter's understanding of this and Mark Juncter's understanding of a cultural, a universalism. Right? The solution for the debate of cultural relativism vis-a-vis human rights is what? Resulting in cultural universalism. That means that culture has to be accepted all across. When is it accepted all across? When it is respecting human rights. Simple example, you can talk about the Bohra community, where female genital mutilation, right? Or you can talk about the Mukanda ceremony. The Mukanda ceremony studied by Victor Turner. Mukanda ceremony is more of circumcision. Right? Mukanda ceremony is more of circumcision. Most of us will only study Victor Turner's study of Endembu society and Madai tree. Madai tree is with respect to the puberty ritual of the female. But when you look at the puberty ritual of the male, it is what? Mukanda ceremony, which is studied by Turner. Or if you want to contextualize your example, you can talk about Sati. Or you can talk about the child marriage. Any of these, sometimes child marriage is perceived to be what? Cultural in nature. But you will have to understand human rights are more prioritized over culture. So that is one basic understanding with respect to this particular chapter. And always you... Similar. Yes. But this is for male. This is for male. Okay. Now whenever you have some question here and there, because sometimes 2.1 will become extremely analytical and that fellow will try to bring in sociology. And he tried most of the times mixing culture and society. That is where we see some question like total institution coming into the picture. right? Total institution was asked in 2020, right? Now, whose concept is this? Erwin Goffman. Erwin Goffman's understanding of total institution. Now, when you talk about this total institution is nothing but it is a process of re-socialization. It is a process of re-socialization. And simple example of this total institution is what? It is a place of a socialization which is away from home. Which is away from home. Simple example is hostel. Hostel is a total institution. Jail or prison, that's a kind of total institution. What is happening in all of these regions? There's a process of re-socialization which is going on. There's a process of re-socialization which is going on in all of these institutions, right? So that is one thing that you'll have to understand here, Erwin Goffman. Apart from that, in case if you don't understand anything in a particular question, use these words: acculturation, enculturation, transculturation, contra-culturation. Acculturation, enculturation, transculturation and contra-culturation. Now, if I have to simply just give you a prima facie here, just simple understanding, when you talk about acculturation, two cultures coming in contact. And I see acculturation could be 4 quadrants. It could be integration, it could be isolation, right? It could be, sorry, it's not isolation. This is marginalization. This is what? Now here what is happening? This is old culture, this is new culture. This is when both the cultures are accepted, it is what? Integration, right? When you are rejecting the old culture and accepting the new culture, that becomes assimilation. When you are rejecting the new culture but accepting the old culture, that is what? Isolation. A classic example of assimilation is what? The tribal societies. A classic example of marginalization is what? The movement of Neo-Buddhism. When you look at the aspects of isolation, simple example is what? Sentinelese. Sentinelese. That's a classic example with respect to acculturation. So acculturation could be any of this. Then enculturation is what? Enculture is process of transforming an uncultured person to cultured person. Transforming uncultured person to cultured person. And enculturation could be conscious or unconscious. Enculturation could be conscious or unconscious. It is process of what? It is process of socialization. It is process of socialization, and not only that, it is process of teaching the culture. It is a process of teaching the culture, that is enculturation. What is transculturation? Transculturation is, you categorically see some new elements of the culture is taken. Some new elements of the culture is taken. That means more or less, you see, for suppose say, if this is one culture and if this is the other culture, what is happening at the interjunction? We see there is an element of transculturation. Some cultures or some elements of this and some elements of the other culture are accepted. That is C1 and C2, that is trans. What is contra? What is contra? If I say culture is social, contra is what? Anti-social. Very simple. Chapris are simple example of contra-culturation. Kada, right? I keep telling this, right? Easy way to remember, because we can never forget them. So acculturation, transculturation, enculturation and contra-culturation. Simple examples. Counter, contra, dono hai. Yes, yes. There's no much difference, because see what is happening is in dacoity also, it is antisocial. Right? Wherever we have those tendencies which are not again accepting the culture as it is, that is that. Okay? Babies, kids. Right? Not No, no. No, that's not. Uncultured here fundamentally means those who are not at all aware about the culture. Right? Because enculturation is all about what? Filling an empty page. Right? So that is what is enculturation. Tribal rebellions, yes. That could be there, but we see more, it is more of a reaction to assimilation. It is more of a reaction to assimilation, right? So use all of these words left and right in 2.1. And you definitely know we have something called as culture shock. Ab culture shock kya hoga? Culture shock is nothing but when the elements of culture 1 is not being accepted by the elements of culture 2. Or when you feel that elements of culture 1 is new to you and which are not present, that is culture shock. What is culture lag? When you talk about this culture lag, you see, where this is material culture, this is non-material culture, and this difference is what? Culture lag. You see that the rate of change of material culture is much faster than the rate of change of non-material culture. And simple extension of understanding of cultural lag is coexistence of traditions and modernity in paper 2. In 5.3 you have modernity and traditions, interplay of little tradition, great tradition. Yes, Yogendra Singh's understanding of modernization, all of those are there. But you have to understand here, when you talk about these traditions and modernity, we see that both of them can never be isolated. Simple example, when you talk about caste association. What is caste association? Caste is a traditional element, but association is a kind of modern democratic institution. Is that traditional or modern? The name itself has no modern. Simple example, online darshan. Now religion as a characteristic feature is what? Traditional. But online is what? Modern. So I always see a coexistence of modern elements along with traditional elements. Right? So that is one simple understanding that you always have to have. That is where you see the great tradition and little tradition interplay also. What's happening when the little tradition is trying to behave like great tradition, that is what is turning into what? Universalization. When the great tradition is turning into little tradition, that is what is turning into parochialization. And in both these processes of universalization and parochialization, I spoke about something called as orthogenic process and heterogenic process. When you talk about this orthogenic process in the context of universalization and parochialization, in orthogenic process, it is just a single line of influence. That means this is little tradition, this is great tradition, no external influence, just the tradition by itself is evolving. But when we look at heterogenic, what is happening? You see, there are some external influences which are present with respect to the process of universalization and parochialization. That is why it is saying what? Hetero. Hetero means what? Different. So heterogenic and orthogenic, those are the processes which are involved with respect to what? Universalization and parochialization. And we see an interplay of great tradition and little tradition. Basic understanding. Okay. Then in society chapter, when you look at society, one important dimension is social stratification. Right? When you look at social stratification, one simple understanding could be the basis of social stratification. When the basis of social stratification is existing, one is the biological, the other one is the cultural. One is the biological, the other one is cultural. In the biological, one base of socialization or the social stratification is gender, the other one is race. Then in the context of cultural, you see caste, class, estate and slavery. Estate and slavery, that is the basic classification that you can see, and you can expand upon all of this, right? This is the basis. Now here there was one question, and which is always important whenever you talk about social stratification, is theories of social stratification. Or this could also be what? Approaches. This could also be what? The reasons of stratification. Now when you talk about these theories are majorly divided into two again. One is the conflict theory. The other one is the functional theory. Now when you look at conflict theory, the conflict theory is further divided into the understanding of Marx, the understanding of Weber, and the functional theory is one given by Talcott Parson, the other one is given by Davis Murray. Right? And if you want, you can also see one more theory which is seen to be existing is what is called as the symbolic interactionism. Symbolic interactionism, which is the third theory which is seen to be emerging, which is seen to be existing in the context of social stratification. Now when you talk about the conflict theories, what is seen in the context of conflict theory with respect to Marx here is Marx says that he majorly talks about economic determinism. He majorly talks about economic determinism, and he says that stratification is purely because of unequal access to the systems of production. Unequal access to systems of production is what is talking about the conflict theory with respect to stratification. When you look at Weberian aspects here in the context of conflict, you see that Weber talks about there are three aspects which are resulting in stratification. One is class, the other one is status, the other one is power. And when you look at class, class is majorly dealing with the aspects of capitalism. When you look at status, it is majorly dealing with the aspects of prestige. And when it is dealing with power, it is majorly dealing with the aspects of politics. He says that the social stratification is resultant because of the interplay of these three: class, status and power, which is talking about prestige, politics and capitalism. But whereas when you look at Marxian was only talking about what? Economic determinism, where only the access to production or the capitalistic section was demanding because of their access to production or strength in production. Now when you look at the functional theories which are seen to be existing here, you see one aspect is with respect to Talcott Parson. Now when you talk about Talcott Parson says that stratification is because of value consensus. The stratification is because of value consensus. That means those who ever conform to the values of the society, they are graded higher. Those who are conforming to the values of the society, norms of the society, they are graded higher, and that is what is seen in the context of Talcott Parson. But whereas when you look at Davis Murray, you see it is purely because of or as a mechanism of social reward. It is as a mechanism of social reward. That means those people who are able to do certain intellectual works, they are placed higher. Those are able to perform certain intellectual works, they are placed higher. That means what? They are divided on the basis of what? Functions. Talcott Parson says value consensus or those who accept the value. But whereas when you look at Davis Murray, those who are talking about it is a mechanism of social reward. Now when you look at symbolic interactionism, in this context of symbolic interactionism, you see that you just write down one line. The symbolic interactionism deals with the positioning of an individual. It deals with positioning of an individual. It deals with positioning of an individual in the society. That means what? Right? I keep giving this example in the class that does anybody respect a last bench candidate? No. Why are they not respecting him? Because he is placed in the last bench. Is it because of his character? No. Just because he is present in that particular position, what is happening? That fellow is observed to be, or that fellow is seen to be last. So that means what is happening, you see, symbolic interactionism is purely dependent upon what is the position of the individual in the society. And you simply know position of an individual is nothing but what, my dear? The status of the individual. It is nothing but status, because when you look at status and role, what is the simple understanding? Status is nothing but position. What is role? Is nothing but function. Status could be what? Ascribed. Status could be what? Achieved. And in the context of role, what you see? You see there is something called as role strain. There is something called as role conflict. And there is something called as a role model. And what is role, my dear? In the context of role is nothing but the expected behavior of an individual. Expected behavior of an individual. When the individual is unable to meet this expected behavior, that becomes role strain. When there are multiple functions which are existing, that results in role conflict. For example, Indian women who are working definitely have this role conflict. And what is this role model? When this expected behavior becomes ideal behavior, the individual turns into what? Role model. The individual turns into what? The individual turns into role model. Right? So that is another simple understanding with respect to the social stratification and that particular chapter of society. Is this clear? Yes? Now when you look at 2.3, बाबू बी वेरी क्लियर इन 2.3. अब इसमें दो ही क्वेश्चन चल रहे हैं. One question is what? Types of marriage. When they ask you types of marriage, monogamy, polygamy, polyandry, group marriage. Yes. In monogamy, polygamy is further divided as polygyny and polyandry. And group marriages, and you have D.N. Majumdar studying about what? D.N. Majumdar studying about polygynandry. And whenever you are writing this, please draw your genealogical diagrams. Now when I say genealogical diagrams, the easier way of representation is what? If this is monogamy. Yes, in monogamy I see different kinds of monogamy existing. This is serial monogamy, right? Then in polygamy what? Khichdi. This is what? Polygyny. Polyandry, keep one fellow in middle and chuttu aipoti. And what is this? Polyandry aipoti. Then in that also you have sororal. In that also you have fraternal. Fraternal, polyandry, sororal, polygyny. This is with respect to when you are marrying sisters. And this is with respect to when you are marrying brothers. Recently, Hatti tribe, chal rahe. Everybody is making a video on that. Except a person like me who is teaching anthropology. Yes or no? That became one sensation now. God knows why. Right? That is their culture. You have to be culturally relativistic, not ethnocentric in approach. वही तो चल रहे थे. ठीक है. So sororal is sister, fraternal is brother, and group marriage. Draw the diagram. Right? Examples क्या है यार इसका?
Types of marriage law with respect to social status, social group,
Simple. I would say draw your structure from syllabus. Because only document which is common between you and examiner is syllabus. He doesn't know what you studied. He doesn't know Vivek Basma. He doesn't know Akshat Jain. He doesn't know other sensational materials. Only thing he knows is what? This maximum amber and amber. And remember, examiner is exactly old person. Do you expect him to revise every day? Maname jayamra mains ayipote odilestunda. So why am I? The focus of these two sessions is understanding what examiners remember. Those people will remember and search for these words. And if you are able to do that, I think fantastic. Now, in case if there is a question, anthropology consists of scientific method, examine. Or anthropology is scientific in nature, examine. In that, the only word that I would search for is positivism and non-positivism. If I don't find the word positivism, non-positivism, I would like random answer that is. So that means what? There are some words which examiners look for. That is what I am discussing at this juncture. I am not, that is my focus also. The reason of keeping value addition is I am going to add value by knowing what is mandatory to be remembered. Right? Now, again, apart from that, you also remember one more structure here. That is laws of marriage. They are playing upon laws of marriage. 1 year they played laws of marriage and genetic impact. 1 year they are playing laws of marriage and social stability. 2023. This was in 2020. That was in 2023. तो अब क्या चल रहा है? Now, so they will play on laws of marriage. And whenever they are talking about laws of marriage, endogamy, exogamy, hypergamy, hypogamy, incest taboo. Along with this, you can also link marriage regulations. Yes, you can also link marriage regulations because more or less they are very similar, my dear. Right? More or less they are very similar. Now, if you want to just club one particular flowchart here, you can just remember this particular flowchart. 1. You see marriage. 1 is proscriptive, or sometimes it is also prohibitive, then prescriptive, and then preferential. Now, here it is mostly what? Incest taboo. Here, endogamy, and here, exogamy. Now, in exogamy also, is it hyper or hypo? Hyper. Mostly hypo will come this side. But it is okay, here also you write off hypo, doesn't matter. Because I am only talking about prescriptive. Prescriptive has half prohibition, you please understand. Right? And then when you look at preferential is what? Cousin marriages. And in cousin, parallel, cross. In parallel, maternal, fraternal, maternal, fraternal. And we also have uncle-niece marriage. The ideal approach for this is show genealogical diagrams. Show genealogical diagrams. That's interesting. Right? Interesting in the sense that is required also because they will only see that. वो तो academicians है यार, वो तो exam people नहीं है. Right? So they are academicians and they would want to see the triangles and circles and here and there. You keep throwing that. Right? This is all your division. Now, whatever be the question, it is extension of this. And what is my approach? If I am saying, say, X, Y, they are asking something, I will say how this is related to this, how this is related to this, how this is related to this. And I will say how this is related, how this is related, how this is related. Mapping. So automatically what happens? To write a 20 marker question, this mapping will sail you through. Because each thing you will just have to write half page. And happily you can manage. Okay? So that is to be seen with respect to 2.3. Now when you look at 2.4 family, in this, only thing that is being focused is what? Impact of urbanization, industrialization and feminist movements. Right? Impact of urbanization, industrialization and feminist movements. Okay? That's thought, 6th chapter. Because when you look at L.H. Morgan talks about 4. Evolution of 4 aspects. Evolution of marriage and family. Evolution of government. Right? Evolution of economic systems. So, that's thought. That's a simple question. Right? Because they were just looking at how are you able to manage that. But the catch in that particular question was you were supposed to write the evolution of family. And along with that, you were also supposed to talk about the kinship terminologies there. Right? That is a catch there. 70% of my answer is evolution. 30% is kinship terminologies. That was in 2021. Yes? So, in this particular topic, I would give you one-liners, you just write. Leak low. Because most of you will have to definitely use this Whatever kind of value addition you have added doesn't matter, but you'll have to write these things. Okay. 1. Industrialization. Industrialization. By the way, how many are writing names here? Okay. 4. Okay. Right. According to Talcott Parson, industrialization created nuclear families. Industrialization created nuclear families or isolated families. Next. According to Michael Young and Peter Wilmot, in their book A Symmetrical Family, he states, or they state, put it that way, they state, the later industrial societies increased wages and reduced unemployment, comma, increased geographical mobility, and reduced number of children. Further, industrialization led to symmetrical families. Bringing husbands closer to the family. And sharing of household work. Yes, urbanization. According to Alan D. Ross, urbanization led to breaking of traditional joint families. And weakening of relationship with distant kin. Next, according to I.P. Desai, there is a strain between younger and older generations. Next, according to Sylvia Watuk, however tough these are to remember, you will have to remember. Right? Otherwise, I would not have given. By now, you would have observed these tendencies. Mandatory. किसी के पास ये studies नहीं है. Right? ये तो दिख रहा है. When I ask you urbanization, you will write GS answer and come. Right? Sylvia Watuk, you write. According to Sylvia Watuk, there is increasing tendencies towards individualization of marital bonds. And decline in the practice of marriage by exchange. Next, feministic perspectives. According to Angels and Jaldreski, according to Angels and Jaldreski, family is a medium to exploit women. Family is a medium to exploit women. Next, according to David Cooper, family is an ideological conditioning device. Family is an ideological conditioning device. In an exploitative society. Next, according to Margaret Benston, family undermines labor power of women. Family undermines labor power of women. Next, last, according to Valerie Bryson, V-A-L-R-I-E, Valerie Bryson, family is meant for oppression of women. Family is meant for oppression of women, and it is universal form of domination. Last, according to Mary McIntosh, in her book Anti-Social Family, they perceive family destroys the life outside family. Family destroys the life outside family. Easy? Yes?
So they don't think feminists. They perceive.
She perceives, you put that way. ఎవరు फेमिनिस्टिक पर्सपेक्टिव लो यूज 3. सी डेफिनेटली दे वुड नो रैडिकल फेमिनिस्ट. लास्ट में दो मैंने बताया ना, मैरी मैकिंटॉश एंड वेलेरी ब्राइसन, वो दोनों रैडिकल फेमिनिस्ट हैं. व्हाट इज रैडिकल फेमिनिज्म? పురుషులందరూ పురుగులు, అది radical feminism. That's what we see. They say men free society. వీళ్ళందరూ అదే, right? So and that is what is Meghalaya issue also. Right? तो वही तो चल रहे हो. तो jokes apart, but these two people will have to be stated. And जो ऊपर दिया है उसमें एक, I think David Cooper is easy. Yes, what is David Cooper saying? Ideological conditioning device, right? So then use कर लो, right? ठीक है. Too much desi, right? But I don't even consider Nivedita Menon as feminist at all. I would say somewhere she is driven by her emotions more than feministic studies. ठीक है, लिखना है तो लिख लो, कोई बात नहीं, right? Because if you are conditioned of writing that, right? But बाकी का somewhere you throw it in middle. ठीक है. Kinship में mostly it is alliance and dissent. Theories of kinship. It is when you see this dissent and alliance theory, Always remember again, if they ask you principles and types of descent, unilineal, double, bilateral, ambilineal. That has to be remembered. If they ask you forms of descent, don't be confused. Forms of descent means lineage, clan, phratry, moiety, that. But types of descent is what? Unilineal, bilateral, ambilineal, and double descent. That is what? That is types of descent. But forms of descent groups, this be remember this, right? Don't confuse there. Rules of marriage, types of marriage, rules of marriage, regulations of marriage, laws of marriage, proscriptive, prescriptive, prohibitive, preferential, those things. But types of marriage, monogamy, polygamy. నేచర్ కూడా ఇష్టం లేదురా. జస్ట్ a minute, we'll start. అరే ఏసీలో ఆన్ చేయొచ్చు ఇప్పుడు. చెయ్యవా? I think we'll have to extend this for one more day. Will that be fine with you? Right? Today maybe we'll finish till 5th chapter. Right? Then tomorrow we'll finish physical and some part of paper 2. Right? If you're okay, I'll extend, otherwise it's fine. Right? That's up to you. Because another 2.5 hours, definitely you'll revise whole Anthro. इतना तो पक्का है. ठीक है? Right? Now we look at descent and alliance. Descent theory by R.C. Brown, Mayer Fortis. This is by Levi-Strauss. Right? These believed in whom, or this they wanted descent. They focused on alliance. Now for them, what is more important? Filial relations are more important. Right? For them, affinal relations are more important. Here, they say marriage is secondary. రాదారా వస్తుందా? చేయించు. పేరేం లేదమ్మా అందులో. That's one theory which is emerging. That's it.
Symbolic interaction.
Symbolic interactionism lo you say caste, right? Now just imagine an IAS officer who is Dalit. What will happen? Forget about IAS. What people would focus on? The caste. And with that, what happens? In spite of that fellow being IAS, what happens with the interaction? The societal interaction will change. It will be more stratified. That is part of the system. So in that context, what is happening? That person is facing that differentiation, or the person is facing that stratification on the basis of what? Position of the individual. And what is that position there? Dalit. Right? And on that basis of the position, what is happening? The interaction is changing. And stratification is all about what? The difference in the interaction that you see. Be it gender, be it race, be it sex, whatever. Right?
So the fundamental premise being the social status given by a society is on a higher pedestal than any other identity.
That's it. Ma.
మొన్న సేమ్ క్వశ్చన్ వచ్చింది సార్, నాకు తెలియదు దిస్ ఇంటరాక్షన్ ఇస్ సింబాలిజం చూసి ఇట్స్ థియరీ ఆఫ్ ఇది మన stratification which tries to understand how interaction determines stratification అది కదా కొంచెం కలిపాను. అట్లా కొన్ని క్వశ్చన్స్ ఏమన్నా ర్యాండమ్ వచ్చినవి ఎట్లా కలపాలి
చెప్తాను, ఖచ్చితంగా చెప్తాను. దానికి బిగ్గెస్ట్ వెపన్ ఏంటంటే సిలబస్. ఎందుకంటే ఇప్పుడు నువ్వు అనుకుంటావా, కానీ అక్కడ ఇక్కడ నీకు ఏముంది, ఇంటరాక్షనిజం ఉంది. నువ్వు ఎప్పుడన్నా ఆలోచించు, వెన్ ఎవర్ దే వుడ్ యూజ్ గీడ్స్ ఇన్స్టెడ్ ఆఫ్ సింబాలిక్ ఆంథ్రోపాలజీ మోస్ట్ ఆఫ్ ద టైమ్స్. And in case if they are asking you symbolic anthropology, they would definitely bring in Geats. I would say Geats is the favorite of UPSC any given day. అసలు ఇంకెట్లంటే మేనమామ అన్నట్టు ఆడు లేకుండా పేపర్ రాదు. బై మిస్టేక్ somehow 24 we had. In 24 we see straws coming into the picture, but otherwise it is Geats. Again we'll see coming back of that only. This year, cultural materialism is important. Particularism is important. That symbolic and interpretative. ये तीनों में से एक तो पक्का आएगा. Because that's the cycle UPSC is following. And materialism, I see it to be last asked in 2019. उसके बाद कहीं that was also 10 marker. After that, they have never asked it. Right? So I'll put that list, right? Because I have a track record of guessing questions up to 15 to 18 in each paper. So somehow I used to depend upon that, and that formula has been working because my range in anthropology is 278 to 324. So वो तो range है मेरा. The least I got is what? 278. So and most of it is going on not BYQs, guessing. वही 20 क्वेश्चन में तो आ रहा है 15 to 18 they're coming. 20 इसको रट्टा मार लो, जो भी just 1 hour before exam. Somehow it's been working, right? I was fortunate enough. That doesn't mean UPSC is leaking anthropology paper to me, right? So depending upon that we'll see. ठीक है, तो we were discussing about dissent and alliance. I was telling you this is Mayor Fortis and R.C. Brown. This is Levi-Strauss. This is dissent. This is alliance. This is filial, this is affinal. For them, marriage is secondary. Here, marriage is primary. And here, they say, marriage is just meant for procreation. But here they say, marriage is meant for procreation. And marriage is meant for social stability. Marriage is meant for social stability. And they said that incest is a negative force. But whereas here they believe that incest is a positive force. Incest is a negative force there, incest is a positive force. Then dissent believed that women are not complete social person. Women are not complete social person. That means that theory did not value women. But whereas when you look at alliance theory, they said that they are the most valuable exchange. Women are the most valuable exchange. Right? Women are the most valuable exchange, but whereas that is what? Women are not fully social person. That is the basic difference. And always remember, what is this? They are fundamentally speculating on what is the basis of kinship. Sometimes they might not ask you the theories directly. They might ask you what is the basis of kinship. Alliance and descent. What is the understanding of kinship? Alliance and descent. What is the contributions of Strauss and R.C. Brown to kinship? Strauss is alliance, R.C. Brown is descent. Basic, right? So that could be one potential question that we see from 2.5, right? Then now when you go to third chapter, now I'll just tell you that when you talk about this third chapter, that is formalism versus substantivism, right? There are certain points that you will have to debate upon. Now, one point that you will have to debate upon always with respect to substantivism and formalism is in the context of the sufficiency. In the context of sufficiency, then in the context of market, in the context of exchange, in the context of the structure, right? All these points, because for you, you just understand formalism says that man is an economic entity. Primitive man is economic. But whereas substantivists say that primitive is what? Non-economic in nature. And they say, what is happening? The substantivists say that there is no concept of scarcity. But whereas formalists say that everything is scarce. And why do they say no scarcity? Because the needs itself are less. But whereas these people say the needs are more, unlimited wants. And because of unlimited wants and because of scarcity, they look at profit maximization. They look at profit maximization or economic maximization. That is what is the core concept of formalism. What is the core concept of substantivism? They are substantive in nature. They are not looking at maximization. Why? Because they have a condition of sufficiency. Why they have a condition of sufficiency? Because there are no needs. There are no extra needs which are existing. So that is all substantive. That means, is it economic or non-economic? Non-economic in nature. One dynamism that you will have to remember is the Marxian understanding. What is Marxian understanding? Marxian understanding says all about production. Marxian understanding says all about production. One. Another dynamic element that you can definitely bring in here is looking at the impact of globalization on economic systems. What is happening? The fundamental transformation that has happened with the impact of globalization is the substantive system started having formal understanding. For example, you see e-commerce having tribal products, right? You see tribal fairs, international tribal trade fairs, all of those. You see MSP for MFP, minor forest produce having minimum support price. That fundamentally means what? We were seeing tribal economics were mostly what? Substantive in nature. But because of the globalization, what do we see? We see the substantive understanding started becoming more formal in nature. We started even looking at the structure of tribal markets. That's what LB Vidyarthi states. LB Vidyarthi observes tribal markets. And he says what? The tribal markets have this structure. This is core and this is periphery. This is core, this is periphery. That is what is observed in the context of tribal markets. Now, who is talking about this change in the globalization? It is Arjun Appadurai. And Appadurai. 2023 question. Huh? No, I had notes. Right? Fortunately, no bouncer was there for me except Natufian culture. 2020. Uska Natufian culture was surprise. Liminality was not a bouncer. Rights de passage was not a bouncer. Or cultural lag. Glottochronology was there in my historical linguistics. Because when you look at branches of linguistic anthropology, you have historic linguistics, structural linguistics, ethno-linguistic, deterministic linguistics. So all of these are branches. Historic linguistics may we had glottochronology. What is glottochronology? Talking about how has the language evolved and looking at the history of the language. वही तो है, ठीक है? So when you look at Arjun Appadurai, Arjun Appadurai categorically talks about a concept of globalization. And for him, globalization is all about movement across nation. Right? Movement across nation is what is understood with respect to Arjun Appadurai. And for him, whole of the world is a global system. For Arjun Appadurai, whole of the world is a global system. And he says that whole of the globalization is driven by movement of 5 things. One, he talks about ethnoscape, idioscape, a financial scape, a technoscape, and a mediascape. That means it is nothing but movement of culture, movement of ideas, movement of finances, movement of technology, and movement of information. Movement of information. And Arjun Appadurai categorically understands that this is what is bringing in dynamism of any system because of globalization. Now you could use this even in your 5.3. Right, 5.1. 5.1 of paper 2 talks about what last line is impact of globalization on Indian villages. Wherever you see this word of globalization, simply bring in Arjun Appadurai's introduction. I am telling you, examiner will roll on the ground. Pakka hai. Right? You talk about his understanding of globalization, simply put this flowchart talking about 5 scapes of Arjun Appadurai: ethnoscape, idioscape, financial scape, technoscape, mediascape. Right? Mnemonic, if you still want to remember, me being fit. Right? Me fit. What is that? Media, ethno, financial, idio, and techno. If you wish to remember that. Okay. Because pakka globalization either paper 1, paper 2. One dimension, and Arjun Appadurai can definitely be one of those people who are existing there. Right? You simply say understand, or for suppose if they are asking you impact of globalization on indigenous economic systems. Right? According to Arjun Appadurai, globalization is all about movement across the boundaries. And he perceived the world to be a global system, where he observed there is movement of 5 scapes, or there is understanding of 5 scapes. 1, ethno, media, idio, techno, financial. One line. And then come into, put a heading, impact of globalization on indigenous systems. And whenever we are talking about impact of globalization on indigenous economic systems, what you are supposed to say? You are supposed to talk about the positive impacts as well as negative impacts. Right?
Sir, my hearing is the table is the differences between primitive societies and modern societies. The table rasi conclusion law, because of the globalization, primitive societies are becoming substantive societies are becoming more formal.
Which year was this?
21 and 22. 21.
I think in 22.
So that one this is better.
Which?
Positive and negative.
This is better, any given day, because that is general structure that we have, right? Okay, so just take down broad points. One is economic marginalization, economic and political marginalization. 2, cultural commodification. 3, cultural appropriation. All these are what? Positive, negative. Negative impacts here. Right? If you still want to add some masala into the answer, I can still give you brain fragment studies. अब क्या है वो? Brain M. Fagan. He writes a book, Clash of Culture. Clash of Cultures. Right? And that's purely on the impact of globalization. Okay. In fact, he studies categorically on indigenous economic systems. Just write down 4 points if you want. One is massacre, ethnocide, ecological degradation, and land deprivation. These are negative. Yes, positives आप लोग पता है. And you can talk about economic opportunities, promotion of indigenous systems, increased employment opportunities, all of those, right? E-commerce, whatever you feel like writing, right? Right? Because positives anyway they are there. ठीक है? You want some study on positives also? ठीक है, लिख लो एक. Darian M. Smith. Darian M. Smith in the book The New Capitalist. In the book The New Capitalist observes improved social conditions of Native Americans. Observes improved social conditions of Native Americans due to increasing globalization, right? Simple line. This will add a lot of value. ठीक है? So that is with respect to third chapter. अब fourth chapter में इतना ज़्यादा नहीं है. And in fourth chapter, simple understanding. You see, band is what? It's a group of 20 to 30. And when bands get formalized, it becomes tribe. And you have chiefdom, kingdom, and state. Now here when you look at the basic classification of all of these political organizations also, what do you see? Whole of your political organizations are stateless and state. And when you look at the stateless, these are divided as what? Band and tribe. And these tribe is divided as kinship based and non-kinship based. Kinship based and non-kinship based. When you look at kinship based, it is lineage and clan. And when you look at non-kinship based, it is age system, then club based, then Melanesian big man, and Polynesian chief. That is nothing but chiefdom. Right? This could be acephalous societies. And this could be cephalous societies. When they give you acephalous societies, all that you will have to understand is what? That is decentralized, stateless. And cephalous means centralized or state, right? So that is one simple, and you know that there is one thing which is given by no. With respect to the segmentary lineage. The segmentary lineage. Evans Pritchard's understanding of segmentary lineage. So whenever you are writing a question on lineage, you please bring in this concept of segmentary lineage. Segmentary lineage given by Evans Pritchard, right, when he is studying the newer society, right? So that is one simple understanding. ठीक है, segmentary lineage could also be a 10 marker. I'll tell you. Very simple, right? अब बचपन में class fights होता था. Yes. If you remember that, you will understand. See, there is some major. ठीक है? Right? Or sorry, there is some maximal. This maximal will have two majors. This major will have two minors. Then these minors will have two minimals. I'll tell you. Just remember this diagram. It starts with maximal, minimal, end with minimal, middle, major and minor. Now it is like what? these two will fight. But these two will unite when these two are fighting. It is like you are fighting for Pinky. Right? Fine. But you will unite when the section B candidate comes and fights for Pinky. That is what is minor. And you will see whole of your UKG will unite when first class fellow is coming and fighting for Pinky. That is what is happening. And you will definitely, whole of your school will unite for Pinky if the other school fellow is coming and fighting. And that is what is becoming as the maximal structure. You see, the newer society has this.
Segmentary solidarity. The same concept.
Segmentary lineage, segmentary solidarity. That is what it is, right? 10 marker, potential 10 marker, right? It could also be segmentary opposition. That means these two are opposite, but these two will unite when these two are opposite. These two will unite when these two are opposite, right? So that is, if you're able to understand and if you're able to explain that, that should be fine. Okay. So now simple understanding again of power, authority and legitimacy. Now when you talk about power, authority and legitimacy, what is power? Ability to influence. What is authority? Legitimate power. And what is legitimacy? It is about acceptance. Legitimacy is about acceptance, right? So that is one simple understanding. If you want some anthropological understanding and studies here, I'll just give you one because at this juncture don't overload your brain. For power, you just remember Weber. And Weber says 3 sources of power: charismatic, traditional, legal. Charismatic, traditional, legal. Right? That is with respect to power. Just remember this. Now when you look at authority, you see it is talking about rail structure. It is talking about rationality, accountability, institutionalized, and L is what? Legitimacy. L is what? Legitimacy. These are the characteristic features of what? Authority. And when you look at legitimacy, again simple extension. Legitimacy, you see, ideological, structural and personal. Ideological, structural and personal. This is based on ideology, this is based on structure, that is based on individual. Right? So that is with respect to, in case if you have a question, anthropological perspective, talk about this. Right? Now, one dynamic element that people talk about is conspicuous consumption and power. When we look at this conspicuous consumption and power, simply talk about it is talking about potlatch. What is potlatch? Display of wealth. Ambani's wedding. Simple. Potlatch. Right? Display of wealth. And when you look at potlatch, it's very simple. It has 3 aspects. Ek to economic, political, social. Kula. What is Kula having? Economic, religious, social. Kula has economic, religious and social. Potlatch has economic, political and social. There is no political angle in Kula. Please remember that. There is no political angle. Rather, it is criticized to be patriarchal in nature. That was the observation from Malinowski, and Malinowski's diary is criticized saying that undermined the role of women in Kula exchange. And that is where you see Urigubbu and Vasi system coming into the picture. Right? Those are an extensions there. And where you see Urigubbu and Vasi system, who is the center? The sister is the center. Who is going to give the gift? The brother. So that means in order to bring in the role of women into the society, they brought in this Urigubbu and Vasi, but otherwise it is Kula exchange, simple Kula exchange. Okay? So this is another important dimension that you need to remember. Okay? Last one is religion. Now, religion may approaches unbeatable question. Evolutionary is evolution. Right? What is evolution? Animism, animatism, fetishism, naturism, polytheism, monotheism. Unbeatable level. Psychological approach. Who is the person? Sigmund Freud. Right? Psychological approach, Sigmund Freud. Functional approach. Malinowski and R.C. Brown. Two more approaches if you want. A symbolic approach by whom? Geets. What's the simple definition of religion by Emile Durkheim? It is set of beliefs. Emile Durkheim talks about religion as set of beliefs. If you want to diversify your definition of religion, you say that it is set of symbols as perceived by Geets. Simple. If you want to give a one-liner talking about religion, right? There is also feministic perspective of religion. There is also feministic perspective of religion. Leela Dubey. Leela Dubey, okay. Leela Dubey studied Islam and matrilineal. Yes, so in that context, is that feministic perspective? दो तीन राइट क्रिटिसिज्म पे लिखना पड़ेगा इसको बिकॉज अब देयर इज नो ऑप्शन माय डियर राइट आई एम एक्सट्रीमली सॉरी बट आई विल हैव टू टेल यू बिकॉज आई एम डैम श्योर यू विल नॉट हैव दिस स्टडीज राइट अंत नमकम हैदराबाद మీద నాకు ठीक है Karen Armstrong right just write down one line. Karen Armstrong perceives religion as male dominant cultural institution. Religion as male dominant cultural institution. Right? Next. According to Simon D. Beaver, religion gave women false belief. That they will be compensated. For their suffering. Yes. Wherever in religion question, isko use kar lena. Why? Because any given day it is criticism. Right? You are criticizing religion as an institution at this particular point of time. One more small dynamism that you can definitely bring in with respect to religion is the concept of secularization of religion. Any question of religion, please bring in this. It's given by Brian Wilson. Secularization of religion. It is nothing but religion is losing its social significance. Religion is losing its social significance. Yes. That means what? The sacred elements of the religion is seen to be declining. And you see secular entities becoming more sacred. For example, you see cricket is considered as a religion today. Music band is considered as a religion. Football is considered as a religion. Yes, this is what is happening here. I see new secular entities coming and becoming sacred. That is why we see Emile Durkheim gives a beautiful statement that religion always continue to exist. Religion always continue to exist. It is only that the old gods are replaced by new ones. Emile Durkheim talks that religion will always continue to exist, that it is only that the old gods are replaced by the new ones. Yes, so you can use this as conclusion, dynamism in any religion chapter. Religion chapter में कोई भी, ठीक है? So ensure that you're ready with that. And whenever they say tribal religions, what? Same, animism, animatism, fetishism, right? Totemism, same thing. One line, लिख लो उसके बारे में. Then magico-religious functionaries, you please remember how many? 5. Priests, shaman, sorcerer, witchcraft, and who is one more? Medicine man. Priest, religion and political. Sorcerer, magic and medicine. Medicine man, majorly medicine. Witchcraft and shaman is majorly medicine. Shaman is majorly medicine. Sorcerer and witchcraft is majorly occult powers. Right? It could be for good or bad. Right? Shaman is medicine. Priest, political and religion. Medicine man, medicine. Shaman, magical and medicine. Sorcerer and witchcraft, occult powers or magical powers or supernatural powers. Basic. And always write the relevance. Are they relevant today also? Priest, yes. Shaman, no. Medicine man, declining. Yes. Witchcraft and sorcery. We have anti-witchcraft legislations coming into the picture. Europe, Maharashtra. These regions have categorically spoken about anti-witchcraft legislations. Always in this question, bring in this relevance. Because today's society doesn't have relevance of these, because with the raising of state societies, with the raising of medicine, branch of medicine, science, with the raising of technology, with the evolution of societies from magic, religion, what is the last form? Science. We see they are losing their relevance. But in this last 2 hours, if you would have observed my lecture, it is only syllabus that I am hitting it. Whatever I am uttering is also syllabus. And that is required in the exam hall. You do that, we would continue. Tomorrow we'll finish paper 1 and do part of caste studies. In paper 2, I will only discuss 3. Caste studies, village studies and tribal studies. Caste studies, book view, field view and contemporary view. Village studies, colonial perspective, nationalist perspective, field perspective, contemporary perspective. Tribal studies, contemporary examples. We'll finish that, right? That would... problem, I'll give you those intros and conclusions majorly in paper 2. Is this clear? Yes, right? We'll meet tomorrow. We'll start early tomorrow today because of some power issue, something is going on. Right? Tomorrow we'll start early. We'll start by 6:10 max. Right? So that we can have longer session. By initial half an hour, we'll finish chapter 6, 7, 8. And then we'll get into physical. Physical will hardly take 1 hour. Right? We'll consolidate physical 1 hour. Some theories and thinkers here and there I'll add. Again, if it is needed. Otherwise, I'm not adding any thinker. If I'm adding some thinker here, it means it is needed there. Okay? So, ye maan ke chalo. And after that, we would do some caste studies. Right? And whatever, those who are not part of my strategic revision program, you please meet me once. I'll send you value addition documents. Especially those who are writing mains this year. You can selectively pick up whatever is required. It will have some structures. You can selectively pick up. You kindly meet me. Online people, if you want those value addition handouts, you kindly message me. Those are writing mains. I would send those handouts. Is this clear? Right? So that's it from my side. We'll meet tomorrow. Thank you.